Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here because I believe Australia is a great place and it's too good to be fouled up by a heap of politicians in Canberra. What the previous speaker said about this country going downhill, it's going downhill in every way. Our economy is being eroded, our defence is being eroded, and our laws are being eroded and made a mockery of. What I'm trying to get across tonight is that we make a three-pronged attack. The legal challenge, and we'll go into that in far more detail later. I believe, as Graham does, that the ultimate solution lies in getting different bums on seats in Canberra, because there is no possibility whatsoever of reforming or making honest the people in the Liberals, National, Labor, the Greens and the Democrats. They have, since 1972, turned this country from a prosperous nation into an absolute mess. Whitlam took us from about 25,000 unemployed to 300,000. Fraser made it 600,000. Bob Hawke topped the million. And if the truth was known, Keating was even worse. But the Bureau of Statistics has not been known to tell the truth very often. So I propose a three-pronged attack. And part of that attack is to show the politicians up for what they are and for what they have done to a wonderful country. So I will try and get across as many of their sins as possible, and I will finish up with a couple of suggestions on how we can fix things. Looking first at defence. Here, Sunday Telegraph, 24th of the 11th, 96, the Janes, the world's authority on defence, says Australia could face invasion. And they go on to say that we had better begin rebuilding our defence forces now because it takes years to create a defence system. What have we got? Australia's Army, 2,500 clerks, 964 cooks, 500 medical assistants, 192 movement assistants, 1,631 drivers, 817 vehicle mechanics, 285 musicians, 585 information systems operators, 430 stewards, 1,728 technical storemen, 241 cartographic technicians, and 3,100 riflemen. 3,100 riflemen. What was the Howard government's response to that? Quick as a flash, they decided to shut the loophole and get rid of our military rifle clubs. That got rid of the potential 6,000 trained men. So they reduced what was 9,000 riflemen down to 3,000. They're not on our side. They haven't been on our side for a long time. I have at home a video, and it deals with an article, Thursday, November the 28th, 1996. Jakarta reassures a nervous Australia. Now, that's great. The people that are reassuring us, I have a video of Mr. Samawaga of the Golkar party, which is now in control of Indonesia, and he's talking to one of the ABC reporters on TV, and they're asking him, what if we don't shut up about criticising Indonesia over their treatment or their genocide in Timor? And Mr. Samawaga says, in response to a question, well, what if we don't stop criticising? Will you withdraw? And Mr. Samawaga says, no, I think that we will not withdraw. Not only will we not withdraw, we will attack. Get it? Now, he is followed within 10 seconds on that video clip by Ali Alatas, Minister for Foreign Affairs for Indonesia, saying that Mr. Sambuaga reflects the sentiments of the people and the Parliament of Indonesia. Now, they are reassuring us. Bit by bit, our defence system is being dismantled. I have watched from 1959, when I joined the Air Force, through to 79 and beyond. I watched them get rid of our aircraft carrier, our Fleet Air Arm, half of our Hercules, our helicopters. They just gave away virtually the Nomads to Indonesia. It never ceases to amaze me. When I joined the Air Force, we had 5,000 rifles and Brens put away in Greece, at Bandiana and places like that. It took 3 years to clean them. And when they got through cleaning them, they started cleaning them again. Now, those 5,000 rifles were put away in case we were ever invaded. I watched them dumping them on the Barrier Reef. I watched them cutting up and sending them for scrap metal down to Sims in Melbourne. They had destroyed or sold to our potential enemies 500,000 out of 500,000 rifles put away in mothballs in case we were invaded. On the 14th of December 1994, they ordered the meltdown at BHP of 110,000 SLRs, each worth about $4,000. Now, that's not smart economics and it's not smart defence. That left us with the Steyr. At the time, we had 3,700. I have been informed that now we have, 37,000. Now I believe we have 70,000. The Steyr, there was an order out saying don't fire more than 90 rounds, don't fire more than 9 seconds of rapid fire, because the gun will melt. Now, 90 rounds is just enough to get the enemy real mad before you say, time out, we're going to have a cup of tea and let our guns cool down. This is not defence, it's lunacy. And it's not accidental lunacy. These people know what they're doing. I have here the newspaper clipping from the Melbourne Age, and it is our plan to defend Australia. If you can see it from back there, you'll see a little red patch down the bottom. That is the area that they intend to defend in the case of a serious invasion. Newcastle to Adelaide, and to hell with the rest. I don't know whether you're in it here, but I'm certainly not in it in Queensland. Now, in Queensland in World War II, they drew the Brisbane line, and they weren't going to defend anything north of Brisbane. They didn't tell us that. They took the arms and they said, we need the guns. The Japs are coming. Now, the Japs are still coming. What Terry forgot to mention was that the motion to disarm civilians was moved in the United Nations in Cairo, May 1995. It was signed in December 1995. The Japanese put the motion forward. The motion read, once again, general and complete disarmament under strict international control. Who sponsored it? Australia. Who voted for it? Everybody voted for it. And within 5 months, they were disarming us. Now, you think the gun laws are draconian. I've got some bad news. The draconian gun laws are going to be introduced in October 1997. How bad's it going to get? We have here a release. Rebecca Peters, Coalition for Gun Control, is bringing some of the Dunblane parents out for a big sympathy hurrah. And we will be putting to the Australian Police Ministers' Council that they should consider bringing into Australia the same rule as is coming into Britain. That is that there should be a ban on private ownership of all handguns over .2 calibre, and even those smaller calibre handguns should not be allowed to be kept in private homes. Pocket knives illegal. Bendigo Advertiser, 29th of January 1997. Half of all Australians once carried pocket knives, and now they are a regulated weapon. Bendigo Magistrates Court heard yesterday. In two separate cases heard before the court relating to pen knives, short-bladed folding knives. Magistrate Michael Connolly said those who kept knives with them did so at their own risk and had to be able to satisfy the police that it was for a legal purpose, such as using it in an occupation, a form of sport, or other regulated categories. Now, the first gentleman, Mark Moroney, was found with a pocket knife in a pouch attached to his belt. He told the police he used the knife to peel apples. $300 fine. Another gentleman, Lawrence Harding, pleaded guilty to having a regulated weapon. He was found with a pocket knife in McIver Road during a routine check. Senior Constable David Summerton said Harding did not have a purpose for carrying a knife. Are we living in Australia? Now, Graham said that they can change the laws any time they like. Well, that's not quite true. There's a lot of laws they can't change. And one of them is that you are innocent until proven guilty. Here, the magistrate said that the man had to be able to satisfy the police that it was for a legal purpose. That's not the law as it was designed in Australia. And if we let these politicians get away with this sort of thing, we're going to leave our children a mess that will take them generations to get out of. Now, let's wake up while we still have time. While we're on human rights, this little piece of paper here, pink, it's restricted. I'll read it to you. This is low-level operations in Australia, and it deals with opening fire on civilians. You may open fire on targets you clearly identify as the enemy. You will not open fire on targets identified as the enemy if they surrender, if they are wounded, not offering a resistance, or if they are identified as non-combatants. Now, they're talking about shooting your children. Nobody said anything here that the enemy had to be armed. Now, when I was in the Air Force, we were trained in crowd control. And the only way we could fire on a civilian was if our life or the life of a fellow soldier or civilian was threatened. And that is the only excuse to fire on civilians in any country at all. This is not Beijing. We don't squish kids with tanks and we don't shoot them without trial. But this is where we are headed if we ignore the dangerous trends of today. Our politicians would have us believe that after 1,200 years of law, we have never made a law regarding the behaviour of politicians. Now, that is not the case. We have twice sat down and written laws to control the monarch and the politicians once and for all. The first document, 1215 Magna Carta. Many of the grey hairs would have been taught about it at school. The younger ones haven't. Their education has been sadly neglected. We have also granted to all free men of our kingdom, for ourselves and our heirs forever, all of the liberties written below, to be had and to be held by them and their heirs of us and our heirs. Now they said forever. That lasted 400 years. And there was a lot of good stuff in it. The right to trial by peers, freedom from unwarranted search, the right to not be immersed for a trivial offence. Every right that we take for granted today originated in these laws. One of them, no bailiff shall in future put anyone to trial upon his own bare word without reliable witness produced for this purpose. There can be no police verballing. The word of a police officer is not reliable evidence. Every person who has been convicted upon the word of a police officer has been framed. And that's sad news. That's just the Magna Carta. Here we have a thing. It's called the Bill of Rights, and it's got the Supreme Court Library stamp on it. And it says statutes in force, Bill of Rights, William and Mary. How powerful is the document? Graham would have you believe that he and his cohorts can write it out of law. That's not so. They would have you believe that it is not an entrenched statute. It's been on the books since 1688. Is that entrenched? What does it say? To the gun owners, what it says is the Catholic, in the preamble it says the Catholics are armed. In the body of it, it says that subjects who are Protestants may have arms for their defence suitable to their conditions and as allowed by law. Now, and doesn't mean if, it means plus. Now, it cannot be misconstrued that it says we can't have arms for our defence. Nobody in their right mind can read it that sentence says the citizens can't have arms for their defence. Not even if they're half mad. They're 3/4 mad. Okay, I have no doubt that we have deep troubles trying to win this in court. The High Court has been stacked by men who had betrayed their nation and have betrayed their nation. And that's not nice, but it is true. These people owe allegiance to nobody in this country. Certainly, they make a mockery of our laws. And as any lawyer knows, if they go into the High Court fighting these things, they've got a 90% chance of losing. So it's not going to be an easy battle. But the people who went overseas in 1914 and 1939 didn't expect it to be easy, and a lot of them didn't come back. So let's be quite realistic. What we're talking about is whether we or not we allow the current crop of politicians to undermine the laws that we put into effect. How powerful is it? Let's have a look at just how powerful this document is. Just one of the paragraphs says, the suspension of laws or the passing of laws by royal decree without the consent of Parliament is illegal. Who are we talking to? We are talking to Queen Elizabeth, and we are telling her that the suspension of laws without the consent of Parliament is illegal. This is pretty heavy stuff, because the Constitution, paragraph 61, says the executive power of government rests with the Queen. And that is why the House of Reps and the Senate can pass no laws in their own right. They don't have the authority to pass any laws without royal assent. That's what it boils down to. This document says that Elizabeth can't. What else does it say? It says that all and singular the rights and liberties asserted and claimed in the said declaration are the true, ancient, and indubitable rights and liberties of the people of this kingdom, and so shall be esteemed, allowed, adjudged, deemed, and taken to be, and that all and every the particulars aforesaid shall be firmly and strictly holden and observed as they are expressed in the said document, and all officers and ministers whatsoever shall serve their majesties and their successors according to the same in all times to come. That's a fairly long sunset clause. It tells who has to obey, and it says all ministers whatsoever and all officers whatsoever, and it says for how long, and it says for all times to come. That sounds to me like an entrenched document. If it is not an entrenched document, what is?
It also says who gets to uphold it too.
That's right. Okay, we may have been betrayed, but it's up to us, and it's our fault. Apathy, we have been betrayed by our own apathy. I agree with Terry that if we rush into this and we fight it on the Bill of Rights, we're going to have some trouble. And if we go in and we fight it on the on the Statutory Standards Act, or the Legislative Standards Act, which says how legislation must be framed, we will be back again fighting in a year's time for the right to possess arms for our defence. Now, these people mean to betray us. They didn't sign that agreement for general and complete disarmament once. They signed it 3 times. The Liberals signed it in 1981, general and complete disarmament under strict international control. The ALP signed it in 1983, general and complete disarmament under strict international control. And in 1995 they did it again. And they're not joking. Now, I'll go along with general and complete disarmament after 159 of the other 160 countries have disarmed. The Indonesians are taking a bite of this country every 3 years. Now, they took half of New Guinea and they committed genocide there. They took Timor and they're still committing genocide there. In 93, they took our oil fields, a block the size of Tasmania, and our politicians were too yellow to stand up. In December 1996, they initialed an agreement. A week ago, they signed away some more of our territory. The area from Christmas Island, Ashmore, Cartier, across to the waters north of Darwin. If you keep feeding your kids to a crocodile, you're going to run out of kids sooner or later. Don't ever feed a crocodile, and don't feed your kids to them. Now, these people, they're very aggressive. I've seen them, and they would shoot you for fun. The Japanese in World War II were depraved little animals. They ate our wounded. They killed something like 1,490 out of 1,500 at Sandakan by starvation and torture and brutality and slave labour. And they have not changed one little bit. They are now about the second most sophisticated defence force in the world. And they love this country. Now, it doesn't belong to the politicians to give away. It's not theirs to sell, and it couldn't have been done legally. You can't see it from down there, but this is a bathysphere map. It shows the seabed. Now, I won't read all this, but it's a legal opinion, and it's got nothing to do with Australian law. This is international law. And it says, this is dealing about, hence it was that Australia was able in 1953 to claim under customary international law rights over the continental shelf a full decade before becoming, in 1963, a party to the Continental Shelf Convention drawn up and opened for signature in 1958. International law. they determined the boundaries by the Deepwater line. The oil fields that we gave away in 93 were all on our continental shelf. I was one of the people who paid to find those oil fields in the 60s. I invested $5 every pay until I and 10 of my friends had enough money to buy a parcel of shares in these wildcat people who were drilling offshore. We found the oil. It was on our continental shelf. It was ours by international law. The ALP gave away something in the order of $250,000 million worth of known oil reserves, $80,000 per income earning family. Now, that's not a bad Christmas present. Small compared with what they are giving away this month. We are very rich people to be able to give away so generously of our children's heritage when those people asking for it have no claim whatsoever to it under international law or any other law. It's not good. But that's what's going on. Your country is being sold out and given away by the Liberals, Nationals, Labor and Democrats and Greens. Now, start waking up. It's your country and it belongs to your children. The banks. Keating's mob let the banks in. Deregulated, they called it. It wasn't deregulated. It was dishonest. By Australian law, anyone who signs a contract to borrow money, there has to be a fixed term of contract, there has to be a fixed amount, there has to be a fixed interest rate, there has to be a fixed time to pay, and an easily and readily determined payout figure. What the banks did is they have a new fixed variable interest rate. They can change it at any time. That's not legal, never has been, and if we go back and make them pay compensation for what was clearly fraud, we would have a lot of problems. But it was fraud, it was theft. How good a theft was it? In 88, I think it was, the bank assets were $87 billion. Within 5 years, they were $382 billion. They went up by roughly $250,000 million. They took us for another $80,000 per income earning family, just on the bank swindle alone. Every one of those farms that was repossessed, and every one of those buildings that went, and every one of those factories, they were sold for a pittance, and they became the assets of the banks. And we let them do it. Just as we have let them destroy our industries. We talk about rebuilding our industries. When I was a child, or when I was a kid, or a young adult even, we had shoes, textiles, clothing, we had white goods, we made cars, we made TVs, an Odeon, remember, Chrysler, HMV, Philips, you name them. We had Stromberg cars, we had everything. Fridges, stoves. We made rail cars, we made ships. And now we make a mess of a good country. No, not we. There's 18 million people in this country and there's only about 15,000 people mucking it up. And most of them are in Canberra, Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. We better remember this because we don't have time on our hands. The country is going down so rapidly. We've gone from the highest standard of living in the world to about 24th. Our youth suicide is great. Why are our kids killing ourselves? Because our adults are sitting on their backsides letting the government destroy a wonderful country. And we're doing it. Every one of us that does nothing is guilty. And it makes me sad. It really does. Just as a matter of interest, back on the gun issue, this is your Imperial Acts Application Act, New South Wales. And it was reprinted in March 1988. And in there it says that the Bill of Rights is law. This is a letter from the Attorney General's Department, New South Wales. This is the Attorney General, written to Bernie Lawler, down here. Bernie Lawler, take a bow. I couldn't get this one out of him, but he did. I have carefully noted your inquiry, and I can assure you that the 1688 enactment remains part of the law in New South Wales. Section 6 of the Imperial Acts Application Act 1969 specifically provides that the Bill of Rights remains part of our law. That same Act also provides that the Magna Carta 1297 remains part of the law of New South Wales, and it's signed the Director General of the Attorney General's Department. And I have letters as good as this from every Attorney General in Australia, except Western Australia, and within the last 2 days I have turned up reference to the Bill of Rights in West Australian law. Now, it's law, and if you're caught doing 140 kilometres on the open road and you tell the copper that that's not a statute in force, he will laugh at you. Now, when a politician tells you that a statute in force is not in force, he's making a mockery of you. It's in force, and it's meant to be in force. Because the politicians that we have in Parliament today, and I make exception here, this is one of the few I have seen that's honest, and we have a lawyer here, a great man. Now, I've known a couple of honest lawyers in my time, and it reminds me of a story. This guy in business said to his offsider, he said, "Quick, get me a good honest lawyer." And his offsider said, "Make up your mind." Now, we have a good honest lawyer here, so once again, Terry Shields, I congratulate Terry on being one of the few lawyers with the guts to stand up and say what has to be said. And it is great to see two speakers like this here. I really am pleased to be on the same platform as them. But an enactment continued in force is an enactment continuing in force, whether the politicians like it or not. Australia has no entrenched statutes. Something that's been on the books since 1215 is fairly entrenched. Elizabeth... Yeah, but 1215 is further than that. Listen, Mickey Mouse's big hand up here. Yeah, okay. The Constitution is being interpreted by judges to mean the exact opposite of what is written. Remember the Franklin Dam case? It didn't matter what was in the Constitution. These guys defrauded the Australian people of their right to an honest Constitution. And they do it every day. And they're getting away with it because there is no penal clause in the Constitution. There's nothing at the end that says if somebody disobeys this Constitution, they get 2 years jail, and they're getting away with it. They're trying to say that a subordinate act overrides superior law. If a law is so powerful that it tells the Queen what she can do you think that something written by a bunch of shady politicians in Canberra can override it? Only if we believe it. I want to bring to your attention a thing called fear. Think of this, fear, false evidence appearing real. If you've ever seen an elephant at a circus, you'll see this huge elephant tethered up to a tent peg. Now that same elephant can push trees over, and does. He could lift that tent peg without even putting an effort into it. But when he was a calf, that elephant was tied up to a tree about 3 foot in diameter with a big chain and a steel cuff around his leg. And every time he got to the end of the chain, he felt pain. Until he realised that it was no good fighting it. Now, with a piece of string, you can tether that elephant to a tent peg. Not because he is tied up, he's only tied up in his own mind. And we are being tied up in our own minds by believing that these politicians can repeal these laws, amend these laws, or ignore these laws. And that is why I want to run the legal challenge. Not just to put the gun laws back where they should be, but to derail the push by Canberra to undermine every one of our inherited laws and take away the only safeguard that we have. What safeguard? Elizabeth is your safeguard. She is the one factor that controls the politicians. In Thailand, the king, when he found out the army had murdered 400 civilian Thais, he called the army in and he told them desist. Touch and go. The army could kill the king. But if they had, the Thai people would have pulled those Thai generals apart piece by piece over weeks. And the generals knew that, and they stopped killing the Thai people. So it is in England. If anyone harmed the Queen, the Poms would tear them apart, just as mercilessly. Now, what's the monarchy all about? The monarchy is a system of election. A system of election that is so honest that the politicians, the media, the business barons, and the mafia types can't monkey with it. It's no good electing a president out of the parliament. That's like trying to take a rotten apple out of the barrel and make it into a pomegranate. There is no way you could find one person in the parliament that you could trust to be the president. If they have all sat there and let our nation be betrayed as it has been betrayed, would you trust them to be the president? That's why we have problems. Okay, now these guys want to get rid of the monarchy. I would say Elizabeth is the greatest failure that has ever sat on the throne. But that doesn't mean the system is wrong. Graham was saying that they had the power to amend the laws. In 86, they passed an illegal act that amended the Constitution without the knowledge or consent of the people. And they told the Poms that we all wanted it and we didn't even know what was going on. It was called the Australia Act. But even in the Australia Act, it says that the states have powers to make legislation, but only includes the legislative powers that the Parliament of the UK might have exercised before the commencement of the Act. And the Poms didn't have the power to repeal the Bill of Rights and the Magna Carta, and nor do we. So there is a grounds for a legal challenge, but if we live in fear, we will never break the chains that these politicians have put around our ankle. And it is only string. It is bluff. There are 18 million of us and 15,000 crooks out there. We outnumber them. Let us not be bluffed. The Victorian Farmers Federation was not bluffed. The Victorian government was doing its thing. And they decided that they weren't going to issue any licences to the farmers for semi-autos. So the Victorian farmers got cranky about it. And they just had a meeting and they decided they were going to initiate a class action. And somebody talked them out of it, and they went to the appeals board and submitted 140 bulk applications for semi-autos. And the government of Victoria went to water and issued the licences rather than go to court, because they don't want a court case. They know that if there's a court case, there'll be publicity, and somebody might find out that we've got a Bill of Rights and a Magna Carta and a habeas corpus. So not only is there a chance of winning, but there is a chance of exposing them to the point where they suddenly become ineffective. Once you know what rotters they are, they will not be voted for. The sort of tactics I believe we should use, I believe we should show them up for what they are. This deals with a hypothetical question put to Mr. Howard, and basically says, Mr. Howard, is it true that farmers can keep their semi-autos and high-power guns to protect their crops and farm animals from vermin? And then, of course, the answer is yes. The ALP, the Liberals, the Democrats all recognise the need to protect sheep, pigs and poultry and all that sort of thing. Okay, Mr. Howard, is it true that personal protection is no longer a reason to own, possess or use a firearm? Yes, all parties agree that private citizens can't have the right to defend themselves. And then I go on to say, Mr. Howard, I don't like your attitude. You value chooks and pigs higher than the value of my wife and children. Now, that's putting it in a nutshell. These guys think more of chooks and pigs and the right to protect them from vermin than they do your children and your wife. Now, in Sydney, there are people who cruise the suburbs looking for victims, and it's the same in the country. There's not many of them, but there's a lot of farmers who have a shotgun or something, and it's always loaded, and it doesn't matter whether it's a human snake or a taipan, it is certainly discouraged. And while you have the right to keep a 22 in your caravan or in your car or in your home or a semi-auto, I don't care. The only difference between a semi-auto and a bolt-action rifle is you end up with the same size hole, you just end up with more holes. Nobody in their right mind would dream of going back to washing on a rock to clean it. You know how they did the Dobie? Whack on a rock, and that knocked all the dirt out of it. Well, an automatic washing machine is a smart move in 1997. And an automatic or semi-automatic rifle is also a product of the age. And as Terry said, we've been using the things for about 90 years and they haven't been used to the detriment of this nation at all. So Howard and his mates are not telling us the truth, as Terry went on to say. Worse, our police are going to be disarmed. Now, anyone who thinks this is a joke, the Poms are ahead of us on this one. They have what they call SOGs, Special Operations Groups, who are the only people who are allowed to have guns in the police force. And they transport them around in SRVs, which are special response vehicles. Now, the ordinary Bobby on the beat, he's got a phone. And if he's in trouble, he goes, help, right? Now, you know how quick a copper can get there, right? 1, 2 or 3 hours if you're in Sydney, right? 1, 2 or 3 days if you're out here, or never. Now, the coppers are in for a shock. The Australian police force will be disarmed. I wrote to every police station in Australia and I told them that they were going to be disarmed. And the young and smug coppers in the stations, they thought this was a joke. Here's this crazy right-wing radical telling us we're going to be disarmed. Within 4 days, I wrote on the Friday, on the Monday at 7:30 on the 7:30 report, they were telling how they were going to arm the police with mace sprays because the Victorian coppers were too trigger happy. And I wrote to the coppers again with a picture of a female copper, which was what they put on the TV. Here's this little female cop squirting this guy with a knife and he goes down in a screaming heap. So I put another cartoon beside it. There's a copper with a mace spray and he's just been blown away by a thug with a gun. And I put on the one theory, on the other practice. Right? Now that's the facts of life. They don't just intend to disarm our Army, Navy and Air Force, and they don't just intend to disarm us, they intend to disarm the police too. And this is all coming from the United Nations. That's not the best news. Okay, what are they doing? Superannuation. When I started work, I paid 7.5%, I think it was, in the National Bank in 1954, and that went into the Social Services Contribution Assessment Act 1945-47, and that was to provide the old age pension. I also paid in the same thing, Income Tax Assessment Act 1936-47, and that was put into a trust account. The Liberals emptied the trust account because there was so much money there, and they said, don't you worry about that, we'll pay you from consolidated revenue. When the Labor got in 72, 75, they said there's nothing in the account, we don't need to keep it open, get rid of the legislation. Then they started the old superannuation trick, 3, 6, 9%. Now we're still paying the 7.5%, and the 9%. And whether you're a worker or a businessman, it's coming out of your pocket in prices or in direct payments. They sold part of the superannuation scheme to the French, $2 billion I think they got for it. Graham might know the exact figures. But anyhow, they sold it and they spent the money. Now, the French aren't noted for being generous, and I've had experience with private superannuation schemes and private insurance companies. I can tell you this, if you pay $11,000, you get back $3,000. Now, these people now control our superannuation scheme. And I went into my son's figures, and after paying in $1,501, he had accumulated $1,295.25. Right? In other words, he had gone backwards over a period of several years. It was 3 years, and he was only an apprentice at the time, but he had actually gone backwards. And that does not count inflation. So he had lost roughly, 10% of his investment in number dollars, and most probably 30% if you take into account inflation as it was eroded. Now, when we had the old age pension, we were safe. Now it is in the hands of the AMP and others, it is not safe. In fact, my son will most probably get $1 million when he retires, and he'll be able to buy a Vespa motor scooter with it. Now, that's the facts of life. We have let these people take over our superannuation schemes. Fine, okay. Righto, we let them take over everything else. I'll be quick, I'm running out of time here. Okay, processed food is 95% foreign-owned. Motor vehicles, 100% foreign-owned. Chemicals, 98% foreign-owned. Pharmaceuticals, 100% foreign-owned. Mining and minerals, 97% foreign-owned. This country is a mosaic of mining claims, and not one that you can see on a map is wholly owned by Australians. Even the big Australians is not Australian. It's just a nonsense. We have become a mine for other nations, and our children will inherit the whole. Electrical, 98% foreign-owned. Banking, 86% foreign-owned. Confectionery and beverages, 84% foreign-owned. Manufacturing, 57%. Insurance, 82%. Building materials, 88%. Hotels, 75%. Oil and gas, 92%. Now, our tourist industry, the Japs come out here, they buy up the tourist resort, they buy the airlines, they buy the bus lines, they buy the shops, and they shop. They fly here in their own aircraft, they stay in their own resort, and they drive around in their own buses, shopping at their own shops, using their own currency. And it's the same in the beef industry. The only thing we keep is the droppings. What can we do about it? Okay, let's get serious. I admire what Graham's doing, and he is most probably where we were in the Confederate Action Party in 1992. Maybe not as good. We had 2,500 members in Queensland. We stood in 12 electorates and we averaged 10.8% of the vote. We wasted our time. 10.8% of the vote's not going to win this deal. That is a list of all of the pro-freedom groups in Australia. Victims of the Commonwealth Bank, victims of the family law courts, tax reform immediately, save the Crown, save the flag, save the Constitution, rural action movements, concerned citizens, you name it. 270 of them. If we could get them flying in formation and start dropping their egos and getting on with saving the country, we could save the country. And that's what I believe should happen. If we write to all of them and say, please, will you settle your differences for long enough to save Australia, we might get somewhere. And it's the same, I write to each of you and I say, please, work together. Do something. Lead, follow. Do something. Whether you join Graham's party or the Australians, it is up to you. It's your country. Nothing is going to save it. from economic ruin, law chaos, where the human swill of the judicial system makes a mockery of our laws, or where we're at the mercy of the people to the north. Now, not one of them are very nice scenarios, but the only people that can change it are you people right out there. Graham can't, Terry can't, I can't, without your solid support. Now, I'm asking you to be part of a team. I don't care what team you belong to, but we've got to have a coalition of all of the groups who want to save Australia. It's no good arguing about the petty things. They're selling our country. They're giving it away. National parks. I've got here privatised national parks. That's a polite way of saying they're going to sell it to the multinationals. The TAB, the New South Wales TAB, was sold for $1.5 billion to expunge the state debt. It brought in $3.59 billion a year. Nobody could do that and be sane, but we're letting them get away with it. Now, please, when you see something like this, stand up on your hind legs, break the chain. It is only held to the tent peg by a string. Now, remember, it's all bluff. There's 18 million of us, 15 million of them. Oh, sorry, 15,000 of them. Missed by that much. Okay, but let's go. Okay, we've got a country to save. We've got most probably a year to do it in. If we don't save it this year, the minor parties will fall on their faces again and struggle to get up again. So please, ladies and gentlemen, it's your country. For the sake of your children, I want you to leave here tonight with a firm commitment that you will do something. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.